Welcome to the Game Changer with Joe radio show with host Juanne Williams. Thanks for being here. Please visit us at www.gamechangerwithjoe.com. For additional details, the show is also live streamed using the handle Roch Life on Facebook, YouTube, Twitter, and Periscope. Are you seeking things that set your soul on fire? Is today the day you start your impossible? Remember, you are enough, always. We hope you leave us better than you came.
Good evening, everyone. It is once again Thursday. It's 8 o'clock on the East Coast, the 19th of July. Welcome back to Game Changer with Joe. As usual, if you want previous recordings of this show or if you need to contact me, to email me, all my contact details are online, gamechangerwithjoe.com. If you need to personally call me, 646-820-5716. I'm also on social media and also on Instagram. I apologize for the late start, but I assure you tonight's show is going to be well worth the wait. We are going to be talking tonight about a topic that's only been like in our mainstream media or been given attention, I want to say for the past 10 years or so, because I can't remember a time previous to that when I heard so much about it. We're going to be speaking about autism, and I know that 50 minutes is not enough time to discuss with you this wide-ranging, broad-spectrum, complex disability. But we will do our very best to get you up to speed, and we hope that at the end of tonight's show, you have not only a better understanding, but you learn something that you didn't know before. And if you're a parent of an autistic child or a relative or what have you, you leave us with better knowledge of the resources and toolkits that are available at your disposal. Before I bring in my special guest, I'm so excited to have her on. We know what autism is, and there's a lot of myths and misconceptions about it. And I hope that tonight we can clear it up. We won't spend a lot of time, speaking scientific facts and stuff like that, because we want to get to the crux of the matter. I did some research, and I went all the way back to when I was in grad school. I studied in the United Kingdom, and I got a master's degree in psychology, and believe it or not, my thesis was on autism. And I studied at least 30 subjects who exhibited signs of autism, but didn't know that they were autistic. And the data was absolutely mind-blowing. Anyway, that's a horse of a different color. So I want to bring in today a lady that I admire very much. She's actually a doctor. She's a school psychologist. I'm gonna let her introduce herself, because whatever I can say will not do it justice. I'm always impressed with how supportive she is of the people around her. April, are you with us?
Yes, I am, Joe. How are you this evening?
Good night. I am excited. I waited for this day. How are you?
I'm wonderful, thank you. I'm so appreciative that you have afforded me the ability to speak to your audience on a topic that is very passionate to me, both professionally and personally.
Yes, you're most welcome. Can you introduce yourself to our listeners, please?
Absolutely. So my name is Dr. April J. Lisbon. I am a school psychologist by trade. I'm also an author, an empowerment speaker, and a family coach specializing in working with families raising children with special needs. However, even with all those different things, the reality is I am the parent of a child with high-functioning autism. What I would like to tell your audience is that for me personally, even with all of the professional training that I had, even with all the graduate training that I received over the years, and even working as a school psychologist for the past 18 years, nothing would have prepared me for my own personal journey to raise a child with autism. So it's one of those things where, books and theories are great, but when you are literally in the midst and in the fire of it, that's where you learn what autism is truly all about. And so, you know, including where I started my journey as far as an educational advocate, that really began when I was, working in an orphanage, and it has always been my dream to advocate for the needs of children. So that's kind of sort of how my professional career, got started. But I never realized how much my professional training would then be a support and a help for me as a parent raising a child with high functioning autism.
I could only imagine. I mean, sometimes we as adults who don't have kids with autism, we spend a couple minutes or an hour, what have you, in their presence and we get overwhelmed. We don't really understand the struggle of having to be the parent of a child 24/7 because there's really no breaks. We go back to our lives and we interact with them for as long as we have to. And then it's I bet it's a 24-hour journey.
Yes, it is. And there aren't any manuals either.
No, there isn't. Even if there is, they need to be updated constantly, like every single year.
Exactly.
Because the more modernized and the more technologically advanced we get, the kids are exhibiting different symptoms. And like, what do I do now? This textbook was written in 2015,
Exactly.
It's now 2018.
Exactly. You are absolutely right.
I want to read you some statements, and you can tell me what is fact or fiction. I have about 5 statements I want to read to you. Is that all right?
That sounds good.
Okay. Autism affects more boys than girls. Is that true?
I would say yes and no. I would say yes from the vantage point that more boys are diagnosed with autism spectrum disorder than girls. And I think a lot of that has to do with the fact that it's very difficult to pinpoint, especially in girls, what seems to be spectrumy types of behaviors. So because boys are so much more rambunctious and physical and things of that nature, you have the tendency to see more of those aggressive tendency and those more behavioral outbursts in boys than you do in girls. So what I would say is the reason why boys seem to be diagnosed more than girls is because they exhibit more of the external behavior characteristics that we know in theory than the girls do.
Okay, good. Now, before I move on, I neglected to give a broad definition of autism. And I hope you'll agree with me when I say that the disorder is often characterized by impairments in social interaction and communication skills. And the behaviors can be very challenging, sometimes repetitive, body rocking, hand flapping. They're sometimes resistant to change. In some instances, there's even aggression and self-injury. Would that be a good definition of what autism spectrum disorders are?
Yes, that's a very good synopsis.
Okay, all right. My next statement, fact or fiction, because we know there's 1,000,001 myths out there about autism. It is found in all racial, ethnic, and social groups.
I would say that's fact, and I can say that professionally as a school psychologist. I've seen autism spectrum disorder in Caucasian children, African American children. I've seen them in Asian children. I've also seen them in Hispanic children. So yes, I would say that it can be found in all cultures and all socioeconomic status. One of the things that I would say that makes it more challenging in diagnosing autism in like let's say in Hispanic populations and Asian populations is the idea of what is culturally appropriate versus what is not culturally appropriate. And we also have to consider the fact that some of those children are in the process of learning English as a second language. So what may seem to be like a social communication deficit may be hard to identify in a child who may be learning English as a second language. But yes, my experience has taught me that Autism has no preference as far as racial demographics or socioeconomic status or anything of that nature.
Awesome. I'm glad you point that out. That's why I've been so excited for you to come on, because you are a school psychologist, so you also have a personal experience, and we're literally getting information from the horse's mouth. We're not getting it from the caretaker, it's literally from the horse's mouth. Another statement I want to make, some people with autism have typical or even above average IQs.
You know what? That really can vary. I have seen some individuals, and I think that goes back to the idea that autism is a spectrum. So I have worked with and identified students who were on the spectrum, but also had lower cognitive ability, meaning that some of those students actually had a dual diagnosis of a mild intellectual disability. Then I've worked with some children who do have your average cognitive abilities, and then I've also worked with those students who have superior to very superior cognition, where they were identified as being both gifted and being on the spectrum. So I think for me, that's more of a myth than anything, because my experience has taught me that you can have a dual diagnosis of autism. Typically, we try to have autism primary because we see a lot of those stereotypical behaviors. But as I said before, you can be on the spectrum and have low cognition, or you can have very high cognition, or you can be average. It just really all depends on the child.
On the child, okay. And like you said, there's so many, that's why they call it broad spectrum, because what defines one child or one adult does not define the other. And unless you know the child, then you can't really say, oh, well, he's not autistic or she's autistic based on what they are exhibiting to you. And here's a myth that I find sometimes very unnerving, and it gets on my nerves. People with autism can't understand the emotions of others.
Yes, and that's one of the...
That is a myth, isn't it?
Yes, it is. I can tell you, even individuals who are nonverbal, even with lower cognitive skills, they can feel and identify emotions. I think what the challenge is that there seems to be a delay in the responsiveness. Yes, they really struggle to clearly pinpoint what they're trying to tell you or trying to understand, because there's a lot of miscues, and I think that goes back to, because they are so literal. Like I tell people, at one point in time, I used to say people on the spectrum were, just basically read people's emotions in black and white. Over the years, what I've noticed, including personally, is that it's black or white. So if so your body language has to be congruent with your words. And like I said, that regardless if the person is nonverbal or have verbal skills, the reality is they are looking for the congruency in what you are saying and what your body is reading, because they don't hear the auditory first. They watch the visual. So if your visual presence is saying that you are angry, yet, for example, you seem to be smiling, they're very confused, because that's not what your body is telling them, And so, so yes, it's one of those things where, although they may not verbally tell you, they do. They read our emotions and our body presence. So,
yes, they do.
I've learned that both ways.
Yes, they do. And I've also noticed that in a lot of cases, when the emotions are directly communicated directly, an autistic person, they're much more likely to feel empathy and compassion for others. And I know that sounds weird, because what we've been led to believe about autism, but this is why I was so excited about doing this show, because a lot of people, it's easy to label somebody as autistic because, okay, you've given them a label, you put them in a box, now you think you know how to deal with them, but you really have no clue.
Yes.
You literally have no clue. And like the books can't teach you, a program on television won't teach you. You have to spend time in their company over and over and be open to learning about the individual.
Exactly.
Okay. Awesome sauce. Thank you for clearing those up.
No problem.
One thing that I found was really interesting, and I've made the decision to go back to school, online school, to for a year to become an behavior analyst. And of course, there is this focus on autism because, 10 years ago, it's autism. What is that? And now because so many people have been diagnosed with it, we're receiving more and more openness and awareness, and I'm so excited about that. And coincidentally, they say that everything goes around in a circle, doesn't it? 6 years ago, I was at university doing my thesis on autism. I didn't follow that path. Now I've come full circle. I'm going back to become a behavior analyst, so I am very excited about that.
Wonderful.
Yes. And I find that when I was speaking to you, something that literally blew my mind that I never, ever even thought about is autism and its relation to suicide ideation.
Yes.
And this is something that has been severely understudied until I think a couple of years ago. But there is some research out there that suggests that people, I think, and correct me if I'm wrong, especially boys 10 and up, are more vulnerable to suicidal thoughts and attempts. Is that the case?
You know what? I will tell you, kind of sort of like you described there. There is, although there's research out there, there's limited research. And what I mean by that is that I feel like it's a topic that's not talked about because we are so focused on the word autism that we really don't have a good grasp of the repercussions of what it means to be autistic.
Yes.
And so I could tell you, professionally as a school psychologist, I was never aware that suicide or even suicidal ideations were even common, for individuals on the spectrum until it literally happened to my family. And so that's when, it was like, this is not what my professional experience has taught me. This is not what the books have taught me. I never knew that my own personal son would have his own personal journey of not only having suicidal ideations, but also attempting to kill himself. And that recently happened less than 3 months ago. And so a lot of it goes back to, that difficulties with social communication, understanding people's body language, the desire to, be friends but not know how to make a friend appropriately. And so unfortunately, like a lot of children who are on the spectrum, he was bullied. And in the past, he had been bullied before, but, he seemed to be that kid where, it just would just, the water would just run off his back kind of a thing, and it wouldn't bother him. And I think this time around, the reason why it became so personal to him, where he internalized it more, was because he felt like the people who were supposed to protect him, like the adults, didn't follow the rules. And what I mean by that, because, which is true, a lot of children on the spectrum, we all go through mood shifts, where we don't want to be bothered, and we get angry at people and things of that nature. And so in the past, for my son, when he would do things that were inappropriate at school and someone would tell him, the administration would do something about it, for example. But this time in his case, it seemed like the bad guys got away, right? And so that created a space where he did not trust adults, including me, And so I became the target of his aggression, the target of his anger, because I was supposed to protect him. I made him vulnerable in the presence of these individuals. And unfortunately, they did not follow the rules as they had done with him. And so and so that kind of sort of led down a path where, the hygiene went down. He was very secretive about things. He didn't want to talk to anybody. And then, like I said, out of the blue, he was like just basically saying, I don't want to be here anymore. I hate my life kind of things. And this is a very happy-go-lucky kind of child. So to hear that, I was very confused because, like I said, I've never had to deal with this before. And so, in that process, one of the things that I found out, which was very alarming and scary, was that there aren't a lot of resources out there, even in the autism community, that discuss how to support the needs of children or teenagers or even adults who are considering suicide.
Mhm.
And I will tell you, that was very shocking to me because, like you said, although, it's not a lot of research out there, we know that there is some research out there. So you would assume that there would be better preparation, if that makes sense. Um,
Yes.
so I contacted like all of the autism communities that are out there, the national ones and things of that nature. And the first thing that was very concerning for me is that one, no one got back in contact with me. And I literally shared my son's story, poured my heart out. No one contacted me except for one organization. And it was gut wrenching because, like I said, when you are contacting 10 people who are geared towards, working with autistic individuals and they're not responding back, the question then becomes, oh my gosh, there's it's bad enough we don't have resources for like applied behavior analysis and
Mhm.
occupational therapy and all the things of that nature, but there's
Mhm.
even less resources if your child or your teen or even your adult is considering suicide. And so, in speaking with this particular person, she was a rep for the company, and she was honest with me. She was like, there aren't a lot of resources to address it. And I explained to her. I said, but ma'am, I'm in crisis mode. I need help.
Yeah.
She was like, trust
Yeah.
me. She was like, trust me, I get it because my daughter has Asperger's, and on many occasions, well, formerly known as Asperger's, and on many occasions
Mhm.
she attempted to commit suicide. And I'm like thinking to myself, oh my gosh, so this is not brand new. And
Yeah.
she was like, no. She was like, but it's not talked about in the autism community,
Mhm.
because the focus is always on, the diagnosis, the disability, kind of sort of the things you described, not feeling
Mhm.
emotions. But once again,
Mhm.
no one wants to talk about this critical issue that
Yes.
people on the spectrum are highly suicidal because, once again, they struggle to make sense of the world around them you know
Exactly.
and with
Exactly.
limited resources, it makes it even more challenging for them to fit in. And so, I still never heard back from anyone from any of the other autism communities. But what I would tell you, when this mom moved from being a representative of the company and just being a mom of a child with autism, I felt like I was able to breathe. I felt like I wasn't the only parent that had experienced this and I wasn't alone. And she
Mhm.
provided me with some great advice. Like one of the things that she said, for individuals with autism, especially those with higher functioning autism, depression is quite common with them because once again, it goes back
Yes.
to the friendships. It goes back
Yes.
to those friendships and, trying to make sense and trying to fit in because you look outwardly, you look normal, but when you start to speak and you start to seem a little bit odd, people kind of sort of question, are you really, are you really normal? What's wrong with you? Why are you acting that way? You know, and so
Exactly.
and so one of the things that she encouraged and she shared was that, you know, she said, my daughter is happily married, she has a great job, and she said what has helped her to move past the depression and the suicidal ideations was actually working out. She was like her her daughter literally has to release those things that she can't change about the disability in order to find something that creates wholeness in her. So, her daughter likes to run. She's a great runner. So going out, for example, and having a good run without stopping helps her to realize that she has control over who she is as a person. She may not be able to
Mhm.
control the Asperger's and what comes with it, but she still has control of who she is as a person. And that
Mhm.
kind of sort of
Mhm.
gave me a lot of encouragement for myself and for my own son.
Thank God she was there.
Yes.
I
Yes.
can't imagine, I don't have children, but I can't imagine a parent, their child feeling more helpless than needed at that moment when call after call after call and nobody, I'm pretty sure by the time you got around to you're just about giving up of anybody being able to help you. Like, okay, what do I do now? I'm sent here to protect, love, and watch over this boy. And at the time when I'm needed the most, there's who do I turn to, And I appreciate how difficult it was for you to share that story. Thank you very, very much. And I know that somebody listening tonight, they will be uplifted and they will realize that, number one, they're not alone. And number two, there's hope and help available if you're persistent enough. And I don't know if it's better for children with autism to integrate in mainstream schools. Sometimes I question that because overwhelmingly the people with autism who commit suicide, either one because of bullying or two, social isolation. And where does the bullying come from? The mainstream schools, correct?
Yes.
I mean,
yes.
you rarely would you find, I don't think it's unheard of, to find another autistic person bullying somebody else. That's not in their playbook. That's not how they work, It's always somebody else who thinks, oh, he's different, And, it starts with the parents, of course. Teach your children, right? Of course, those who don't listen are going to turn out to be bullies either way. But you wonder, are mainstream schools doing them any good? And now that we seem to have a working definition, we have a working diagnosis of autism, what do we do with this information? Do we need to put more funding into schools, especially for them? Definitely more resources in crisis mode. There should be a dedicated number. We know that there's a national suicide prevention hotline, but I don't know if there's a national hotline for parents in crisis mode. It's really...
Yeah, and I will interject because I did contact the national, the national suicide one, and basically they did not have any resources. They kept sending me out to someone else.
Oh Lord,
which was, and so because that was the first place that I was told to contact, But once again, because people on the spectrum are such a unique population, they have not kind of sort of figured out how to work them into what they do. And I think, once again, knowing that, that people on the spectrum are out there and that they are at risk for suicide and suicidal ideation, a lot of these big, national organizations that talk about suicide prevention need to create I don't know if it's a task force or a team that specifically focuses in on, individuals with autism, because like you said, autism is on the rise. It's not going anywhere. So our resources needs to catch up to what's happening within our world.
Exactly. I mean, it's like becoming to a crescendo now because we see more and more people being diagnosed with it. That's fine. We have the resources are in place to diagnose. Now we need more resources to support and enable and motivate and empower.
Exactly.
Yeah, we know what it is. Thank God it's been brought to light because before we even had a working diagnosis, so many people were suffering. So many people lost their lives because they felt as if all around them was darkness. They were, and they fell under the radar. A lot of them probably had depression, but they fell under the radar because they didn't know how to they didn't know how to express themselves that this is what I'm feeling. It's already difficult for them to communicate, right? Think about how do they explain to them what's going on in their head. It's a minefield asking them to do that.
Yes, it is.
I appreciate you bringing that to my attention because I was blown away. I mean, I work with people who are homeless, they have dual diagnosis, and fortunately, none of them are autistic. And I have to, with the question we always ask them about self-harm and stuff, but I never, ever even gave it the slightest thought about, autism. So what are some signs we should look out for if the person is autistic? I mean, I know any threats of suicide should be taken seriously. Changes in weight, changes in mood and behavior, their sleep patterns. What else should parents be looking for?
Of course, once again, the hygiene.
Yes.
One of the things that I noticed in my own personal household was the level of verbal and physical aggression my son was exhibiting towards his siblings. you know, because once again, you always have sibling rivalries. You know, he's the
Yes.
oldest. He wants time to be him. To have his own personal time. You know, he has,
Mhm.
a brother that's, almost 3 years, younger than him, and then he has a baby sister. But
Mhm.
he became so um, irritated with them that
Mhm.
it was more than normal. Something else that I noticed with him was his sleep patterns was extremely disturbing.
Yes.
One of the things that I found, with people on the spectrum, their internal body clock is always off, but his
Mhm.
was to the point where I could not even predict when he would be up first thing in the morning. So, like for example, I knew consistently he would always be up anywhere between 4 and 4:30 in the morning. He's always been
Mm.
that way for years. But what I noticed was that he was starting to get up anywhere between 2 and 3:30 in the morning, which wasn't his norm, and he could not fall back asleep. So here's this kid who's in middle school, up anywhere between 2 and 3:30 in the morning, and hadn't had a good night's sleep because he was tossing and turning, thinking about what was going to happen on the school bus, the next day, kind of a thing.
Ah.
So I noticed a lot of that. One of the things that I also noticed with him that um, was the amount of sensory output he needed, and so it got to the point where his stimming behaviors, where he just could not even sit still long enough to even eat breakfast or eat dinner before he was up pacing, um, you know, pacing the floors and pacing the room. And typically he has a focal stem where he would just like literally, watch the wall. He would stem for a little bit, and then he would, that would seem to calm him down and give him, get him centered again. That didn't even help. His focal stem, he couldn't even do that because his anxiety levels were so high, to the
Mhm.
point where, he literally had to stand up in order to eat, just to get that proprioception in his body to kind of sort of calm him down. So that was one of the things that I will tell parents. A lot of us, still have our kids who have those stems. If their stemming pattern is not their typical pattern, then there's something else that's going on with
Yes.
them. And like I said,
Yes.
at that point in time, I didn't think anything about it. I just thought he was, just going through being a tween. The
Mhm.
hormones were kicking in and all that stuff. But that's not what it was. It was that he needed more sensory input to get him centered, and nothing seems to help except for him pacing back and forth. His preoccupation with video games became more aggressive and more dark and more violent. To the
Mm.
point where, like I said, the verbal and the physical aggression was so bad that, the my middle son basically would cry often and would say that he hit me, he called me stupid, he called me dumb, those kinds
Mhm.
of things that were atypical, for my son became his new normal, during that critical period of time. And that was like from, I would say, because the incident happened November of 2017, where we saw the decline was from January to June, um,
Wow.
of this year. Yeah. So, and it seemed to progress, um, the more losses he experienced at school. So when his main teacher left, that seemed to just send him over the edge, kind of a thing, because that was one more change that had happened to him. So yeah, be mindful of any changes into their learning environment. Like I said, my cue that something was really off for him was the stimming behaviors, the verbal aggression, the physical aggression, things that were
Mhm.
not his norm. Like I said,
Mhm.
became his norm. So, and then, like I said, once again, those traditional things of wanting to cause harm. Oh, and physical clothing.
Yes.
This was
Yes.
something that I did not think about, but as we've gotten through the hump and we've gotten through the process, what he would do, he would put on his black robe. I thought the black robe meant that he wanted to harm himself because when you see people dressed in dark clothing and all that stuff, eventually when we got to some semblance and some, a peaceful moment, he was like, no, that's me trying to alert you that I am feeling sad, I'm feeling depressed, and I need help.
Mhm.
So,
Oh.
you know, Right. So, and like I said, it took us some time to come to that because when he had the
Yeah,
robe on, that's when he was trying to get the knives to cut his wrist and stuff. Um,
yeah.
but he couldn't tell me that, Mom, me putting on this black right now is because I'm depressed, I'm sad, and I don't know how to tell you. Kind of a thing. So, now I've learned to monitor those clothes and to ask, okay, now you have on this black robe, what does this mean? And it's just like, no, it doesn't mean anything anymore. I'm just cold right now. But I know when I see the black robe, I need to ask, where are
Hmm.
you in this place as you're wearing this robe? So that,
Hmm.
I know how and when to intervene to support him. But, definitely
I
monitor
you
clothes.
Yes, oh my goodness. My heart's breaking for you, and just listen to you describe it. It breaks your heart. I'm sure as you as a mom, it's like 10 times worse. Um, I wanted to say, like you said, he's giving you the sign where if he's wearing the black coat, you need to have that discussion with him. I just want to give our listeners some pieces of advice.
Hmm.
In terms of if what to do if you suspect that your child is in crisis. Of course, if your child is verbal, please talk about it. In my job, because people, it's a dangerous myth when people think that talking to somebody about suicide or hurting themselves is going to raise the risk of a follow through. That is not the case. That has been
No.
proven time and time again not to be true. You're not putting any thoughts in anybody's head that is not already there.
Yeah.
It is so important that when someone is in their crisis, we remember that they are their absolute most vulnerable. If there's a time for us to be sensitive, to be empathetic, to be gentle, to use love language, to listen, to not minimize the emotions, that is the time. That is the time to do it because we can never know where their thought pattern might be. I know sometimes I've heard the term question, persuade, and refer. That's actually a term that is used quite often, and a whole institute set up around it to learn more information. I wanted to ask before we take a short break, how is your son doing today, if you don't mind me asking?
Oh, absolutely. I will tell you, and this is something that I do want your viewers to understand, that there may come a point in time on your autism journey where you may have to seek hospitalization for your child.
Mhm.
We did have to seek hospitalization for my son because the bullying had basically just took control over him. But where we are today, I will tell you that he is in a much better place. Um,
Yeah.
he's to the point where, we have him, and I know people are like, he doesn't need to have such a rigid schedule, but I do have him on a very rigid schedule at this point in time so that he knows, that this is what's coming up next.
Yeah.
There are some times where, where there may be shifts in the
Mhm.
schedule, and we're working with him on being okay with those shifts. But as long as
Mhm.
we create consistency, that seems to help him. I have, initially, like any teenager, he tries to test limits after he was, released from hospitalization and he came back home.
Mhm.
But because we have this this visual schedule in place, we have options. We know what next steps will come. If he
Mhm.
chooses not to follow the rules, then that has seemed to help him, one, realize that, first of all, one, mommy's not giving up on me. Two, the actions and the behaviors that I was exhibiting, she's going to hold me accountable for it. Um, and three, he's able to breathe. And like I said, um, you know, he was removed from school. I literally put him up out of school prior to the end of the year, school year ending. And what I think, at this point, like I said, he's in a happier place. We're on
Yeah.
vacation. Everything is, he's back to being himself. Um, he still has some anxious stuff, but you kind of sort of just talk him through the process, just like any other
Mhm.
day. And like I said,
Mhm.
he's happy again. He's not yelling at people. I'm giving him, and this is something that I also know, I've given him responsibility over his siblings, to
Mhm.
the point where he feels like, oh my gosh, my mom sees me as being independent.
Yes.
but he likes that feeling of being
I
independent.
love it. Yes.
And being reminded, that your siblings, they watch what you do, and if you don't
Mhm.
want them to model bad behaviors, what should you do? He'll tell you, model good behaviors. So he really works hard on modeling those good behaviors. He's not, aggressive. He's not yelling at people. Like I said, I feel like, he's in a much happier place than when we started the school year. So I'm hoping this
It
continues through into the next year, into the upcoming school year as well.
it has to be like one of the best feelings ever when you see that he's in his happy place. And I think that's like a brilliant idea, giving him responsibilities, because now all of a sudden he has to answer for what he's done with those responsibilities, right?
Yes, he does. He
I
sure
think
does.
that's amazing. So what I'm going to do now, I'm going to take a short break here. We're going to listen to about 3 minutes of the autism anthem, I Am Here. And I think it's one of the most beautiful songs written about any topic that we could be struggling with. So we'll be back in a few minutes. Okay, April?
All right, sounds good.
Okay, thanks.
With every breaking dawn, a brand new child is born. Someday they'll be full of hopes and dreams. It won't be very long till they move out on their own, 'cause that's the way that life's supposed to be. But something isn't right. There's a lost look in their eyes. They're crying out, why can't you just see? I'm in here when the joy turns to crying. See the world through my eyes for just a moment in time. I'm in here, oh don't you know I'm trying to find a way to show you who I am. So through the years, through triumph and through tears, these are the ones who make their own way. They touch you deep inside, where your love just cannot hide. Just open your heart and hear them say, I'm in here when the joy turns to crying. See the world through my eyes for just a moment in time. I'm in here, oh don't you know I'm trying to find the way to show you who I am. Oh, the world may be cruel, my times of desperation. Can't find the words to express how I feel. So I strike out in pain and frustration. I might not speak, but my feelings are so clear. I'm in here.
Thank you very much for remaining with us. That song is pretty much the autism anthem. If you want to listen to the remainder of it, just go onto YouTube or to read the lyrics. I think it's just an absolutely beautiful, beautiful tribute. Um, I want to spend the next 10 minutes or so hopefully offering you some important advice on how how vital it is that if you're a parent of an autistic son or daughter, or your relative that's living with you, how important it is to practice self-care. Those of us who don't have um, a relative or a son or daughter with autism can never really fully understand what a typical day's life in the parent or the relative of a person that does. And too often, like in anything in life, when we're so focused on taking care of other people, nobody's really taking care of us. And we tend to, only until our body starts giving us little signals, hey, something's going on. And sometimes we don't even pay attention to those signals, that we really have to stop and take a rain check. And sometimes it comes too late. One of the pieces of advice that I want to offer you, and this not only applies to a relative or parent of an autistic child, but to anybody in general, is to focus on you in capital letters. This is not being selfish, it is being selfful. And it is no longer a luxury to take care of yourself, it's a necessity. You are an important caregiver, and you deserve to be taken care of and celebrated. It is something that I had to learn in my own ways. It took me years to do that. You have to make time for your hobbies, your interests, the things that you're passionate about, even before you had children, or before, back in the time when you could remember what it felt like. Set aside some time each week. Do you only have an hour? That's totally fine. It's better than none at all, that you can focus on these things. Sometimes you have 5 minutes before bed, depending on how your day is going. A few hours over the weekend. It doesn't have to be something big and grand. Little things often have a lot of impact on our hectic lives. The most important gift you can give to somebody who you're taking care of is a happy you. Another piece of advice that I feel is important to give, and I'll bring back Dr. Lisbon in a minute, is it is okay to be sad. Don't try to put on a brave face. If you're struggling, say, I am struggling. Nobody's going to think, worse of you. And even if they do, these are not your friends. They're not your tribe. Find different people to hang out with. Keeping things inside is only going to manifest itself in terms of physical pain. And you might have an outburst at inappropriate times. You must get things out in order to be able to move on. When we have a rough moment, we think everything is going awful forever. It's not usually forever. It's just a single moment for the rest of your life. So please try not to forget that. I want to bring back Dr. Lisbon for her to give us some more helpful advice, maybe some kind of strategy, some kind of resources that as a parent of an autistic child, or even a relative that you might be raising, can lean on in terms of taking care of ourselves. You're with us, Dr. Lisbon?
Yes, I am.
Yes, thank you so much for sticking around. What kind of resources are available? What would you suggest our listeners do if they're struggling? And we know a lot of them are, to take care, because it's like a child and a half, pretty much, that they are struggling with on a daily basis. What would you suggest for them to do? Any kind of help that might be available?
Yes. But the first thing, and this is something that I've had to learn to do a lot, is, be honest with myself and understand that I cannot raise my autistic child on my own. I must get help. And what I mean by that is that for parents, I don't care if you're mom or dad, you cannot be the superhero to save the day when it comes to your child with autism. You're going to have to entrust at least one person, to watch your child, even if it's for 1 hour, in order to practice self-care. And the first reason why is that you need it for yourself. And secondly, you have to teach your child that they have to learn how to interact with other people. And the only way that they're going to learn how to feel comfortable with other people is that we have to step out of the picture. And I know that's very hard for us to do because of all the things we know about autism. But if you want your child to be able to function within this world, you have to allow them to connect with someone else. The next thing that I had to do, because it wasn't getting done, the self-care, I literally have to put it in my calendar.
Yes.
I literally write it down that April, this is what you're going to do. I don't even put, 10-minute self care time. What does that mean? What does that look like? If I just put self care time, I'm not going to get it done. I literally have to commit to what I'm doing. And then what I've also learned to do was to include my child in my self care process. And what I mean by that is that, for me, what works best is to you take like a 15-minute Epsom salt bath. So I've created this visual this visual schedule, on my bedroom door where my son knows, okay, this is mommy's time. You're not from this time to this time. You're not allowed to talk about, what your video game you're talking about. This is all mommy's time. And once mommy's finished, after this 15 minutes is over, then we can talk about that. But really helping your child to know that they're not being neglected, but you too need your own personal time, and it's okay. And I think that's the big thing for the child with autism. They need to know that you're okay if they're not physically within your presence. And so that's something that I've had to train my son to do and to accept in order for me to get some self care time. Another thing, like I tell people, it's okay to seek therapy. I know as parents of children with autism, we feel like we can't talk to anybody. And, sometimes, like I tell people, talking to parents of typically developing children is very hard because they don't get it. But you have to find someone else to talk to. So if your insurance company can afford you the ability to speak with a therapist, definitely do so. Um, Another component that I find that's very useful when it comes to just parents raising children on the spectrum is that you need to take yourself out. Take yourself out, whether it be for coffee or if it's for a nice dinner. Take yourself out and just breathe. Um, that's the thing that we don't know how to do because we're always in our child's face, making sure that they're okay, that we stop breathing.
Yes. Yes.
And it's like when we start breathing, our children start breathing. When our anxiety levels is up, our children's anxiety levels become up.
Yes,
So
they can pick
when
up on that stuff
they
so much.
can.
Yes.
I don't know what kind of little detective thing they have going on, but they can pick it up. And
Yes.
so, and they can't let it go. Whereas we can let it go and allow it to fizzle out, they can't let it go. So that's why it's so critical that we not only practice self care, but we model it for our children so that they too know that when I'm anxious, what do I need to get? I need to get my sensory tool. I need to take a walk. I need to take a hot bath. These are things that I do that my son is now modeling when he finds that he's like he's off balance kind of a thing. So
Yeah.
definitely, if you're like me, I mean, if I don't write it down, it's not going to get done. But you must plan it out and plan it out with your child. So, like I said, they don't feel like they're neglected, nor do they feel like, mommy is gone kind of a thing. But you have to show them that it is okay for me to have my time and know that I will be back to you in 10, 15, 20 minutes, kind of
I
a
love that. I absolutely love that. When you said that, because sometimes that is our lives. If we don't put it in the schedule, it does not get done. Whatever it takes to get you what you need to feel balanced, secure, more in control, please do it.
Yes, yes.
Thank you, thank you, thank you, thank you, thank you. I know that you are a motivational speaker and you've also written a book. Yes, tell us about that briefly, please.
Okay. So I've actually written two books. My first book is entitled Stretch Thin, Finding Balance, Working and Parenting Children with Special Needs. And basically that just talks about, the process of, trying to make sense of raising a child with disability, specifically autism, and trying to, find some semblance in being a professional career and, not feeling like you're neglecting one for the other. My second book that was just released in April is Autism in April, A Mother's Journey During the Tween Years. And this journey really talks about, how my son finally started to accept the idea that he was autistic, because that was a battle for several years. But also really working through this bullying journey, finding relationships, him having his first girlfriend, and all those things that tweens go through, and then when the ball drops with the bullying issue. So that's kind of sort of what that looks like, and it talks about how I went through that process and how I felt, I felt like I could not support him during that part of his journey. So, that's really what that talks about, and how we as parents need to encourage ourselves that, autism is something, and I won't even say it's secure. The behaviors that are associated with autism, we can't fix, even with love, right?
Exactly.
So what we have to learn is we have to learn how to walk this journey out with our children, even when we don't know what to do. It's okay not to know what to do, right? What all you can do is to do your best, and know that you're basically providing a new tool in your child's toolbox to help them be successful in the future. So that's kind of sort of what that book is about as well.
In addition to what you said, not only knowing that you're doing your best, but trusting the process, that, you give yours and the universe is going to work out the rest. Because there's something to be said when you give your child the love, the attention, the direction, and all the help in the world. Later on, that's going to manifest. Even if you don't see it right away, and sometimes it gets really tiring, in the end, he or she is going to turn out to be a good, happy human being. And that's all we can really hope for.
Exactly.
I am so appreciative of you being on tonight. It has been an absolute joy having you on. You need your own show, April.
Thank you.
You have, yes, you do. You have so much to offer, and your depth and breadth of knowledge is just absolutely astounding. I thank you so much for being here, and I appreciate you taking time out of your busy schedule to meet with me and to talk to our listeners tonight.
Absolutely, and thank you for the invitation once again.
You're welcome. Have a good night.
You too now.
All right.
Bye-bye.
Good night. Well, listeners, I hope that the past hour, as it has been for me, has been a learning experience, an eye-opening experience. I know we spoke about some difficult things, and some of it was very heartbreaking to hear, but there was a reason and a purpose, because the stories need to be told. You can never talk about it enough. You can never say, oh, I've heard this story before, because each story is different. And I've been so excited, and looking forward to tonight for quite some time. I thank you for spending Thursday nights with us. I know that this is an investment of your time. I appreciate the platform that I've been given. Again, if you need to reach out to me or find ways to email me, or if you want to be a guest on the show, all of the information is on our website, GameChangerRadio.com. Until next week, take care of yourself and your families. Good night.